You ever notice there are some people you just can't really influence? Not in an obvious way. They're not shutting you down, they're not arguing, they're not trying to dominate anything. But whatever angle you come from, it just doesn't land. And if you've ever dealt with someone like that, or you're trying to get to that point yourself, you'll probably get something out of this. So just stay with me for a minute. Because once you start noticing these patterns, you can't really unsee them. For a long time, I couldn't explain it. I'd see certain people in conversations, at work, even in normal everyday situations, and they just seemed steady, like nothing really pushed them off course. And then I came across something from Machiavelli that made it click. He said, "Men are so simple and so much creatures of circumstance that the deceiver will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." And when you really sit with that, it's pretty direct. Most people are easier to influence than they think, not because they're weak, but because of small habits they don't notice. So when you come across someone who doesn't fall into that, it stands out. And usually it comes down to a few quiet behaviors. One of the first things you start noticing is how they handle their own decisions. They don't go out of their way to explain themselves. So the first silent behavior is they don't feel the need to explain what they've already decided. You'll see it in normal situations. Someone asks them why they chose something, and instead of walking through every detail, they'll just say, "Yeah, that's what I'm going with." And they leave it there. No long explanation, no trying to get everyone on the same page. At first, it can feel a little unusual because most people do the opposite. Most people will explain everything. They'll try to make sure you understand their reasoning, almost like they're trying to make the decision more acceptable. But the more you explain something, the more room you give someone to step in and start adjusting it. They can question it. They can reframe it. They can slowly shift your thinking. These people avoid that completely. They decide, they state it, and they move on. Then you start noticing how they respond in conversations, or more specifically, how they don't react right away. So another silent behavior is they take a moment before they respond. You can say something slightly off to them, maybe even something meant to get a reaction, and they won't jump in. They pause, just for a second, and then they respond calmly. That small pause does more than it seems, because most people react fast, and fast reactions are usually emotional. That's where influence happens. That's where someone can guide the conversation without you realizing it. But when someone slows things down, you can't rush them. You can't pressure them into reacting. They respond when they decide to. And that changes the dynamic completely. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." And in this case, the wise move is not reacting right away. It's taking that moment and choosing your response instead of giving it away. Then there's something that seems small, but it's actually a big one. They're comfortable with silence. So another silent behavior is they don't rush to fill empty space. You'll see this in conversations all the time. A question gets asked, there's a pause, and most people start talking. They explain more than they need to. They add extra details. Sometimes they even say things they didn't plan to say, just to avoid that silence. But these people don't do that. If there's nothing to say, they're fine with that. They just wait. And eventually, someone else starts talking. And when people talk just to fill silence, they usually reveal more than they intended. So without trying to control anything, the person who's comfortable being quiet ends up understanding more about everyone else. And honestly, this is one of those things that's easy to miss at first, but once you start seeing it, you'll notice it everywhere. If you're picking up on this kind of stuff already, you're probably paying attention in a different way. So if you want more videos like this, just simple, clear breakdowns like this, you can subscribe if you want. No pressure. Now, another pattern shows up over time, especially in how they deal with people pulling away. So another silent behavior is they don't chase. If someone becomes distant, changes their energy, starts pulling back, most people react to that. They reach out more. They try to fix it. They adjust themselves to keep things stable. But these people don't. They notice it, and they give it space.
They don't try to force things back to how they were. And it's not about ego. It's just understanding something simple. You can't control how someone shows up. Machiavelli put it clearly, "He who depends on himself will attain the greatest happiness." And in this case, not chasing is a form of that. It means you're not depending on someone else's behavior to stay steady. And when you don't chase, there's no pressure point to use against you. You'll also notice something in how they talk about themselves. They don't share everything right away. So another silent behavior is they're careful with what they reveal. In everyday conversations, people open up pretty quickly. They talk about stress, problems, frustrations, and most of the time it feels normal. But these people take their time. They listen more than they speak. And when they do share something, it's intentional. Because once people know what affects you, what gets to you, what you care about, that information can be used. Not always in a negative way, but it can still be used. So they stay open, but not exposed. Then there's how they handle boundaries. And this one is very simple, but very clear. So another silent behavior is they're comfortable saying no. They don't turn it into a long explanation. They don't over-apologize. They'll just say, "That doesn't work for me." And they leave it there. Most people struggle with this. They'll say no, but then they explain it. They try to make it softer, more acceptable. But the more you explain, the more room you give someone to push back. These people avoid that. They keep it simple. And because of that, their boundaries are harder to move. And then there's the last thing, which ties everything together. It's something you only notice over time. So the final silent behavior is they observe more than they speak. They're always paying attention. Not in an obvious way, just quietly. They notice patterns. How people act when they want something. How their tone changes. What they repeat. And because they're not constantly reacting, they actually have space to see what's going on. So when something feels off, they catch it early. Machiavelli said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." And these people, they're part of that few, because they're actually paying attention. So when you step back and look at all of this together, it's not about being cold. It's not about being distant. It's just a steady way of handling yourself. They don't over-explain. They don't react too quickly. They're okay with silence. They don't chase. They don't overshare. They say no clearly. And they pay attention. None of it is loud. Most of it goes unnoticed. But it changes how people interact with them. Because manipulation usually depends on small openings. A reaction, an explanation, a need for approval. And these people don't give much of that away. So when someone tries to pressure them, or steer them, or influence their decisions, there's nothing to hold on to. And that's why you can't really manipulate them. Not because they're trying to resist it, but because, in a quiet, consistent way, they don't give it anything to work with. So if this made sense to you, and you want more of this kind of breakdown, simple, practical, no extra